The hunt had begun. From the command deck of the Blood Tide, General Varesh watched as his warriors descended onto Sangre 4, their drop pods slicing through the planet's thick atmosphere like the talons of a predator. He leaned forward, black eyes narrowing as he took in the display before him, a live feed from his hunter's visors. The terrain below was a tangle of deep jungle, thick canopies swallowing all but the sharpest slivers of moonlight. Varesh allowed himself a chuckle. They called this a death world. That would soon be corrected. No world earned such a title if it harbored prey this feeble. Signal received. One of his tacticians murmured. Ground units deployed. The hunt begins. The war room was filled with the low hum of satisfaction. The Zyrith dominion was built upon conquest, but even conquest had its pleasures. The hunt was tradition, an ancient rite where the strongest warriors tested themselves against the weakest remnants of the vanquished. The humans left behind on Sangre were exactly that, remnants. Stragglers, broken survivors of the last engagement, barely worth the effort. Yet even the weakest deserved the honor of being prey before the final extinction. The warriors spread into formation below. Cloaking fields flickered to life, bending the jungle shadows around their bodies. Varesh noted their discipline, the ease with which they moved. These were the finest of the Dominion's elite, veterans who had hunted 100 species to the edge of oblivion. Through the visor feed of First Blade Tariq, Varesh watched the squad crest a ridgeline, scanning the landscape ahead. His voice was confident, steady. Thermal scans show residual heat signatures. Humans passed this way recently. They know we're here. Does it matter? Someone else said. A ripple of amusement spread through the unit. Tariq exhaled, shaking his head. It only makes the hunt more interesting. They moved with practiced efficiency, sweeping the jungle in a slow, deliberate arc. The planet's air was thick, humid, buzzing with unseen life. Occasionally, an insect skittered across a visor, causing a brief shimmer in the cloaking field. It didn't matter. There was no human technology advanced enough to detect them. The first sign of their quarry came quickly. A rusted canteen, discarded in the dirt. The ground was uneven, muddied from recent rain, but the deep impressions of human boots were unmistakable. They had been running. Good. Tariq crouched, running a gauntlet finger through the tracks. 3, maybe 4. They split here. One went north, the others east. Varesh observed from above, disinterested. He already knew how this would play out. The lone runner was bait, a distraction. The others had likely saw higher ground, attempting to stage a hopeless defense. Tariq motioned to his second. Kedrith, take 2 and pursue the lone one. The rest with me. Acknowledgments flashed across the visor feeds. The squad split seamlessly, their movements near silent. One by one, they vanished into the jungle. The chase was short. A human form broke from the underbrush ahead, stumbling through the undergrowth. Male injured, desperate. Kedrith and his 2 hunters closed in, weapons trained. The human was panting, his body slick with sweat. He turned sharply, glimpsing them just as Kedrith decloaked. The moment was electric, the last flicker of defiance and prey before the inevitable kill. Then the human smiled. Varesh frowned. Something was wrong. The visor feed distorted, flickering wildly. A burst of static crackled through the war room speakers. Kedrith. Tariq's voice cut in. Report. Nothing. The 3 hunters' vitals flatlined. Varesh stood, his gaze sharpening. The remaining warriors had stopped moving. The jungle pressed in around them, suddenly far too quiet. Sir. Tariq's voice was softer now, uncertain. Something is here. A new signal flickered across the feed. Unfamiliar. A voice, alien yet eerily controlled, crackled through their comms. Run. A body dropped from the trees above. Not human. Not entirely. It was Kedrith, or what was left of him. His throat was slit cleanly, head twisted at an unnatural angle. His armor had been stripped, repurposed. His weapon was gone. Another hunter took a step back. His cloaking field sputtered, useless in his fear. This isn't possible. More bodies. One, then another, dropping from the trees, like discarded refuse. Xyrath warriors, skilled, trained, superior, left hanging lifeless. Their deaths weren't careless. They weren't rushed. They were trophies. Tarek turned sharply, scanning the shadows. Eyes up. Weapons ready. Too late. A figure moved, impossibly fast, slipping through the trees like smoke. Another hunter gasped. His weapon jerked from his grip as something unseen pulled him into the blackness beyond. His scream was short, cut off with a wet, sickening snap. Varesh's fists clenched. This was wrong. This wasn't the pattern of desperate survivors. This wasn't random resistance. This was a hunt, and they weren't the ones leading it. Tarek's breathing had changed. No longer the measured calm of a predator in control. It was tight, controlled panic. He tapped his comms again. Command, request immediate extraction. Silence. Then the static shifted. A voice answered. Not Xyrath. Not human. Something else. Too late. The jungle swallowed them whole. Tarek's warriors were moving, but they weren't hunting anymore. They were trying to survive. The enemy was unseen, their presence marked only by the occasional flicker of movement, just enough to keep the Xyrath off balance. The jungle was no longer terrain. It was an adversary, shifting and closing in around them. The bodies of the first fallen had been left behind. Recovery was impossible. Their mission had unraveled too quickly. Their formation shattered. Their superior technology suddenly useless. The cloaking field still functioned, but that no longer seemed to matter. Something was out there, and it could see them. A rustling in the trees sent one of the younger warriors spinning, rifle raised. Tarek seized his arm. Hold, he ordered, voice low, sharp. You fire at ghosts, and we die faster. The warrior's breath was shallow, his mandibles twitching. Sir, we need to. The shadows shifted again. A shape, a flash of metal. The warrior lurched, gurgled, and fell forward. A blade had punched through his throat, buried to the hilt. As he crumpled, the weapon slid free and vanished back into the underbrush, the hand that wielded it never seen. Panic spread through the ranks. The line collapsed into fragmented clusters as warriors moved erratically, scanning the darkness for an enemy they couldn't track. Tarek pressed a command on his gauntlet. A tactical overlay burst to life across his visor, feeding him heat signatures, trajectory predictions, environmental hazards. None of it helped. The enemy was there, but the readings were erratic, flickering in and out like ghosts in a failing machine. He signaled his second in command. Rally at my position. We hold here until extraction. Another scream. Then another. A warrior fired wildly into the trees, plasma round searing through leaves and branches, turning foliage into charred embers. His shots hit nothing. The enemy had already moved. A body dropped behind him. Not human. Another Xyrath, throat opened. The shooter barely had time to react before a cord looped around his neck and wrenched him backward. He thrashed, gasping, clawing at the garrote sinking into his armor plates. The sound of his struggle lasted only seconds before a final, sickening snap. Then silence. Tarek's breath came fast now, his own mind betraying him with doubts he would have mocked an hour earlier. No species adapted this quickly. No species turned from prey to predator in mere minutes. It wasn't possible. And yet it was happening. His comms crackled. A whisper slithered through, low and deliberate. You still don't understand, do you? A shiver coiled up his spine. The voice wasn't a recording. It was speaking to him. Tarek motioned for his warriors to fall back, regroup. They had lost 6 already. Their numbers were dwindling, their cohesion broken. Their extraction team wasn't responding. This had become something else entirely. The hunt had been turned inside out. A flicker on his visor's HUD. Movement. Right flank. Tarek pivoted, rifle raised, tracking the shift. Then he saw it. For the first time, he saw it. A figure crouched low in the brush, barely 10 meters away, clad in scavenged armor that didn't match. Pieces of stolen plating strapped haphazardly over a lean frame. A Zyrith rifle hung from their back, one of his own, claimed from a dead warrior. Their face was obscured by a crude rebreather, but their eyes burned cold in the dim glow of scattered embers. Not desperate, not afraid, calculating. Tarek moved. The figure vanished. A sharp whistle cut through the air, and then the jungle came alive. More figures, fast, shifting, outpacing the eye's ability to follow. Another warrior fired. His shot found nothing but air before he was wrenched sideways, a curved blade opening his side in one clean motion. The figure reappeared behind him before he even hit the ground. No hesitation, no wasted effort. Tarek's grip tightened around his rifle. They weren't just fighting survivors. They were fighting something that had been made for this. A human who should have been dead, should have been begging for mercy, was now standing over his fallen hunters, weapon raised, eyes locked onto him. Tarek exhaled sharply and did something no Zyrith had done in generations. He took a step back. The figure tilted its head slightly, considering him. The voice returned through the comms, softer this time, but no less lethal. "We learned from you." Then the lights cut out. The visor display flickered and failed, and the killing began again. Darkness swallowed everything. Tarek's visor crackled with dead data feeds, a useless stream of static as his HUD scrambled to recalibrate. But there was nothing to recalibrate to. The jungle had collapsed into a void, sight and sound erased in an instant. He wasn't alone. The heavy, controlled breathing of his remaining warriors filled the comms, their bodies shifting in tight formations, trying to establish a perimeter. But it was futile. They were reacting to an enemy that had already moved. A sharp, wet gurgle cut through the silence. Then another. Tarek felt it before he saw it. The slow unraveling of his squad, one by one, bodies slumping into the brush, lives ending without so much as a struggle. It was surgical, precise. Death, distilled into its purest form. Then something brushed his shoulder. He spun, rifle raised, but there was no one there. Just the whisper of a presence, slipping through the dark. His HUD flickered, one last desperate pulse of light before his visor fully died, leaving him blind. Then the voice came again. "You brought this on yourselves." Tarek lunged, fired. The plasma round ignited the jungle for an instant, revealing nothing but dense foliage. No target, no enemy, just the twisted remnants of his failure. His breath came hard now, sharp with something he refused to name. A Zyrith war leader did not fear. He did not doubt. He did not. The brush rustled. Close. Tarek braced himself, the barrel of his weapon sweeping the dark. But the next voice wasn't the human's. It was one of his own. "General, I can't. I don't." A shriek. The sound of armored limbs thrashing against the dirt. Then silence. Tarek's grip tightened. The hunt was over. This was war. He activated his gauntlet, bypassing the ship's comm channels and opening a direct line to the blood tide. Immediate retrieval. Lock onto my signature and... A new sound crackled through his feed. Laughter. Human. Slow, measured, deliberate. A chill scraped up his spine. Then the voice returned, quiet, but thick with something more than amusement. "You still don't get it." Tarek turned, listening. The jungle itself felt alive, shifting, watching. "You thought this was a culling." Another step. More movement. It was a test. A figure moved through the dark. A silhouette, deliberate and unhurried. The faintest shimmer of metal caught the dim glow of a dying fire. A weapon, Xyrath in design, claimed and repurposed. Humanity doesn't lose wars, the voice continued. We learn. We adapt. We become what we need to be. Targ braced for an attack. None came. The figure stopped just short of the light, watching him. Then, after a long pause, the human spoke again. Now run. And Targ did. The blood tide loomed overhead, its crimson hull casting a fractured glow through the jungle canopy. Targ ran toward it, limbs aching, mind reeling. His warriors, what was left of them, scrambled behind him, their movements panicked, uneven. The extraction zone was close. Too close. It felt wrong. Too easy. His gut churned with an unfamiliar sensation. Doubt. A voice crackled through his comms. The bridge crew. General, what is your status? He hesitated. How could he explain? That a hunting party of elite Xyrath warriors had been dismantled in less than an hour? That the prey had turned predator and taught itself how to win mid-conflict? That for the first time in his life, he was running from something he couldn't quantify. He swallowed the words and barked a single order. Initiate lockdown. No one leaves the ship until I board. The line went silent. Then, General, we have a problem. A static burst. Then another voice. Deeper. Human. Too late. The comms died. Tarek skidded to a halt, his blood running cold. Above, the blood tide was shifting, its engines flickering, hull lights dimming. His mandibles clenched. No, not possible. The ship was sealed, shielded, impenetrable to anything short of an orbital bombardment. And yet, he watched as the vessel trembled, listing slightly. The kind of movement a warship shouldn't make. The kind of movement that said something had already gotten inside. He turned, scanning his surviving warriors. 10 left. Maybe 9. He hadn't counted the last kill. Their postures were wrong, jittery, hesitant. He saw it now, the breakdown. The hunt had become a slaughter, and the Xyrath psyche had no way to rationalize it. They weren't built for this. A noise snapped his attention skyward. The blood tide's docking bay doors opened. His heart pounded. That was impossible. There was no command issued, no override key in play. And yet, the bay yawned open, revealing the cavernous interior. A single form stood silhouetted in the dim light. Human. Alone. Tarek's stomach twisted. The figure raised an arm, slow, deliberate. A gauntlet, stolen Xyrath tech, glinted against the faint glow of the bay. Then the blood tide's automated defenses activated. Turrets pivoted. Drones flickered to life. A full combat response. Except it wasn't aimed at the human. It was aimed at him. At his warriors. A deep, rolling static buzzed through the comms again. Not interference. Something else. A voice distant, cold. Your ship belongs to us now. A second passed. Then the sky came alive with fire. Plasma rounds tore through the jungle. Warriors screamed, scattering, some trying to return fire, others simply running. Tarek lunged for cover, barely dodging the first volley. His own ship, his own command, was exterminating them with ruthless precision. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was erasure. Tarek slammed his gauntlet into the ground, activating an emergency beacon. The signal pulsed once, then vanished. No response. No fleet. Nothing. His warriors were dying around him, and the humans weren't even bothering to finish them personally anymore. They had let the blood tide do it for them. The figure on the docking ramp remained unmoving, watching, waiting. Tarek's pulse hammered. He had two choices. Charge the ship, die in a storm of plasma, or run. A low, bitter realization crawled through him. This wasn't just a victory for the humans. It was a lesson, a warning. Xyrath arrogance had declared them superior, untouchable, the apex of warfare. But these humans, these monsters, had learned the Xyrath ways, dissected them, and then turned them against their creators. Tarek met the figure's gaze. The jungle burned around him. The blood tide cast long shadows, its new owners waiting to depart. The hunt was over, and the Xyrath were prey.